Poor Thomas. When I read this story, and maybe when you read this story, I read things about it, the implication is, Thomas, you're not very bright. We've got this down pat. Get with the program. Well, if you had a choice of believing because you actually saw Jesus, would you go for that? I mean, I sure would. Okay, so let's give Thomas a break. Well, the reality is he was fortunate enough to see Jesus, as we hear in the story. And you and I, generally speaking, are not going to see Jesus in this same way, so what do? You remember the story of Peter and the beloved disciple. Well, first Mary goes to the tomb. She sees the tomb's empty. She goes back and tells them. The two of them run to the tomb. The beloved disciple stays outside, but he looks inside, and the text says, and he believed, though they did not understand the idea of him rising from the dead. How did the beloved disciple do it? Because if we can figure that out, then we can do it too. So here he is. He arrives at the tomb. He sees everything that he sees. He takes it all on board. And then, in a mystical, extraordinary jump into intuition, a mystical intuition, a new awareness, a sense of things, suddenly he says to himself without words, I get it. I get it. Jesus has risen. That's an intuition. This is the beginning of our faith. It's this intuitive sense that, yes, indeed, there's something going on here that's quite extraordinary. The part that we must not miss in all of this is that he's the beloved disciple, the disciple Jesus loved. He loved Jesus. The matrix of this experience is love, or familiarity, or friendship, or wondering, hoping to know more, to be engaged more. That's how they were together as disciple and Lord. And so the disciple arrives, and what he sees is the place where my friend was is now empty. And somehow in the mystery of that loving, of Jesus's love, of the divine love combined with the human, this intuition occurred to him, and he could say, I believe. I believe. That's how you and I come to believe. We perceive the mystery in a sense of loving, and we draw on our intuitive powers. Now, if we could get the beloved disciple to do the Myers-Briggs, he might have been an I or an E, I can't tell, but he was certainly an NFP. Big thinker, future-oriented, not all too detail-oriented, loving, feeling, spontaneous, ready for an intuitive perception of things. Well, that's what I or ENFP people do. And if you're not an ENFP, then we all have to find that part of our personality, because that really is where all of this starts to become very, very real. Early in my time as president of Rebuff Jesuit Preparatory School in Indianapolis, I was talking to my spiritual director, and I was telling him about, learning to be president of the school, and he said to me, Ben, I'm not hearing love as central to your program. I said, John, I'm running a high school. John said, we had this kind of conversation all the time. He said, Ben, I've never run a high school. I'm a theology professor. I am telling you, I don't hear love as central to your program. Well, I had to take that seriously. I had to take it seriously. Here I am, the leader, and I had to know how to speak the truth with love. St. Paul says, speak the truth. That has to be done. It's part of leadership. But it has to be done with love. I have to be able to see all of the people, the parents, and the students, and the teachers, and the staff, and so on, to see them with kindness, with generosity, with a desire for their good, for the hope that they and we can all work together. Well, did that work? Well, in the first reading today, we heard that the disciples did a pretty good job of that in those early days. How did they do that? Because they saw one another in this matrix of companionship, of friendship, of a sort of equality and compassion and justice. That's what the call is. Now, the world's harder than that, of course. I had many, many wonderful experiences at Brebeuf. But did I get attacked? Yes. Was I misunderstood? Yes. Did I get abandoned? Yes. Was I crucified? Yes. It happens. It happens. But if the matrix, my interior matrix, my interior mode of engagement is what Jesus calls me to believe that he is the Christ, to believe that his love is enough to help me do the things I need to do, and that if I do these things faithfully, then extraordinary things are going to happen. Extraordinary things are going to happen, and I might never know what they are. This is the asceticism of ministry. It's quite like the asceticism of teaching, the asceticism of coaching, the asceticism of parenting. We all don't always know what comes next. Well, what comes next in our gospel stories is the last chapter of John, and it's the disciples are very discouraged at this point. It's the middle of the night. They go out on the Sea of Galilee. They're fishing. They're not catching anything. Then suddenly the light comes, dawn, and as the light comes, there's a man on the beach. Well, who's the man? Well, you know and I know. They don't. Where's the light? Jesus is the light. There he is on the beach. The text says they do not recognize him. Finally, the beloved disciple does recognize him, and he tells the others. Well, that's what we have to do. You and I have to tell one another where we've seen the Lord, where we've seen God at work, where we've seen the love of God changing things. That's what we do. That's what community is, the community of the disciples, the community of the church. That's what we have to do. Then they catch this extraordinary catch of fish, 153 fish. They drag all the fish to the shore. Jesus makes our work productive. Productive, we can all be productive. We know how to do that. But he makes our work productive beyond anything we could imagine. I can tell you, frankly, it's axiomatic among my guys, me and my guys, that we preach our homilies, we do what we do, and then afterwards somebody will come up to me and say, oh, Ben, it was real nice when you said that, that was real important to me. And the thing that they thought was so important was this little point that I threw in at the end, just sort of as like an accident. Or they come up to me and they said, you know, when you said this, that was so important. I didn't say it. I didn't say it. You heard it. Why? Because Jesus comes down in the power of the Spirit, inspires what I say, and then sends that out into you individually and puts into your ears the things you need to hear. Jesus makes our work productive beyond anything we can imagine. Beyond anything we can imagine. And then, in that same story, he feeds them. What does he feed them? Fish, ichthus, the sign of Jesus himself, and bread. And bread. He feeds them breakfast. So you and I are gathered here this morning. What are we doing here this morning? We are wanting to believe. Many of us do believe. We believe this much, but we haven't quite gotten to this other believing part yet. We want to believe more. So what do? We come here, we listen to the readings, we sing the songs, we pray the prayers, and we talk to one another. We talk to one another to assure one another, to reassure one another, to care for one another, to affirm to one another the value and the goodness of what we're doing here this morning. The actual presence of Jesus here, inspiring what we do. And, as if that weren't enough, he feeds us. He feeds us through his word. He feeds us through his presence. He feeds us through the bread and the wine that becomes his body and blood. And then at communion time, you and I say, only say the word and my soul shall be healed. Jesus wants to heal you and me of our hurts. to calm our fears, to reassure us where we're worried, to give us a sense that, yes, indeed, he is with us. He is with us. Yes, life is very, very difficult, but he really is with us. That's the message to your heart and to my heart in communion time. That's why this period after communion, when we're all sitting down again, is the best. For me, it's the best part of the Mass, because it's the time when you can just feel it in the room, especially here, especially at Holy Trinity, including at daily Mass. That silence that comes after communion has been distributed is the matrix of love, divine love shared with you and shared with me, the peace of God poured out into your heart and into my heart as we're gathered here together. This is so amazing. It's so extraordinary. And Jesus asks us to believe what we intuit to be true, what we experience to be true, what we come to know to be true, even though we may not understand it. We may not understand all the fancy theology. You got to know some theology. But my point is, it's the experience. The experience. This is what Ignatius tells us. It's the experience of God actually present in your individual life, in our collective lives together. So this is quite amazing. I invite you, and now I invite myself, just for a moment now, to take a little bit of silence. I think we're going to profess our faith. And we do so with the ancient formula of the church. But what do you believe? This is a little time for you to say to yourself, for me to say to myself, what do I believe? Do I want to believe more? Yes, of course I want to believe more. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. So let's just take a moment then in silence, and then I will invite you to stand and we'll go on with our worship together.